You know, it's interesting. I was not going to go back to the show. I was not going to go back to continuing to do the show because it was very difficult
Yeah.
to get to get it on YouTube, because YouTube tends to really they issue copyright strikes. I had a few difficulties even with some of the stuff I've already recorded,
Right.
and then when Scott Becker died, and I
Yeah.
remembered that I recorded an episode with him, and it was one of our most popular episodes. It's so strange.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of views on that, and so I felt like there was something. I'm not a superstitious person, but I felt
Yeah.
that there was something telling me I should go back to the show.
Yeah.
And also, he had this other idea. He said, because he was an avid reader of my vintage cable box stuff,
Okay. Right.
and he said, you should really do a podcast around your vintage cable box thing. It would be a lot of fun. So I'm actually considering doing that.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. You totally should do that.
Okay, so welcome to that Twilighty show about that zone. Here with Nicole Phelps, and we're going to discuss the episode, The 30 Fathom Grave, episode 2 of the 4th season of Twilight Zone. This is the hour-long episodes of the season that was. It was actually intended to be a mid-season replacement for a show that was canceled. What happened was Twilight. It's a bizarre story straight out of Twilight Zone. Twilight Zone was canceled at the end of season 3. And then another show was put in its place, a comedy drama called Fair Exchange, I believe. But then Fair Exchange wound up being canceled. So they knocked on Rod Serling's door. They said, we're sorry we canceled you. Could you come back? But we need you to be an hour long now. So Rod Serling said, okay, fine. Even though he had given up his office at CBS and he had gone back, I think he had gone to a college in upstate New York to teach writing or something, creative writing.
Oh.
And so he didn't really have any time to write, but he tried to write as much as he could, but he brought back his old cohorts, all his writing friends, and they worked on this hour-long show. And it wound up doing, I guess, well enough in the ratings that they brought it back for a 5th and final season the next year. So the 30 Fathom Grave is the first, or the second episode after, what was it? In His Image, the one I did with Brahman. So
Yeah.
how are you, Nicole?
I'm doing well. We are in a really wet season right now in Portland, so I'm looking forward to some sun.
Yeah, it rained here today, but it got warm again. So I'm sitting here sweating, actually.
Oh, are you?
Strangely
God,
enough.
no, we're like in the 50s.
Oh, I would kill for 50s right now.
Yeah. So I can't complain. It's good. It's not terrible, but some sunshine in the forecast will be nice.
It's not hot enough to put the air conditioner in. But
yeah,
I think I'm going
right.
to put that sucker in. Did you hear? Okay, you guys are in Oregon. Did you hear the story that they're trying to legalize shrooms in Oregon?
Yes, I did hear that. I did hear that.
Okay, they legalized marijuana, but apparently marijuana is not strong enough anymore. So everybody needs to be on psychedelics now. It's so bizarre.
Yeah.
I knew this was going to happen. You give it time, it'll be shrooms, and then after that, it'll be like, hey, let's make heroin legal. Anyway.
Oh, God, I hope not.
Oregon is one of those great testing grounds for that kind of stuff.
There you go. Yeah. They're just where people are all for it.
All right.
So we'll see.
Nicole was, like me and Broman, good friends with Scott Becker, who passed away recently. And I asked Broman to tell us a story about Scott Becker. I had a little story about Scott Becker. Now it's Nicole's turn. So if you could share something, share some kind of a memory of him.
Yeah. So Scott was just great. He had such a great personality. He was super, just one of those people that was very even keeled. He wasn't super, he was kind of unflappable, and there was a night at New Actors Workshop. I think it was when our second year, and it was our, our party to celebrate that we had graduated.
Right.
And there was a party at the school, and a lot of people were intoxicated.
Okay.
But that was like the first night that I hung out with Andrew, who is now my husband after all these years. And that was like the first sort of like date that we had. Was going to this dance club called Twirl. And then because we had people there that were not old enough to be at the club, we ended up going back to the New Actors Workshop and having like this impromptu party. Mm-hmm. And then we were like there all night, like listening to music and stuff. And like as all the intoxicated people sort of like passed out and fell asleep, me and Andrew and Scott and a couple other people all went to a diner. And it was probably like 5 or 6 in the morning when we went to this diner and had this big, huge breakfast after being up all night.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember Scott made a comment about me not eating meat. And so Andrew was like, "Oh, are you a vegetarian?" And I was like, "Oh, no, well, kind of. I just eat meat sometimes."
Okay.
And so then Andrew had to leave because he was going to work, and Scott and I think Scott and me and someone else all got into a cab and drove away that night. And I would kind of like waved at Andrew as he like, walked off onto 34th Street somewhere.
Right.
And our cab drove away. And so I just, when I think of, my relationship with Andrew starting, I always remember Scott, and I always remember like the great time that we had at the diner that fine morning after a long night of celebration and
that's what
joy of finishing school.
That's what you call it. That's the classic New York breakfast. Is just you're out all night and then you go into a diner. And most diners in New York are 24 hours, and they'll cook you. They'll cook you anything in 24, no matter what the time. So
no matter what the time, and it was, I miss a good New York diner, but I have very fond memories of Scott and just how kind he was, and just super talented. So.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. That's good to hear. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we move on. We got this episode, The 30 Fathom Grave. It was written by Rod Serling, directed by Perry Lafferty, who directed the previous episode and then the episode after that. You got 3 in a row. What the heck is happening in this episode? This episode really is kind of like a horror story, but it takes place on a Navy ship. And it's you got Simon Oakland. Simon Oakland was most famously known as he played the psychiatrist at the end of, or the psychologist at the end of Psycho, who's trying to explain why Norman Bates is crazy. And later he was in Kolchak, the Night Stalker, with Darren McGavin. He played his editor, Darren McGavin's boss. But you also have a very young Bill Bixby in this episode too. Bill Bixby would go on, of course, to be the Incredible Hulk, or David Banner, that is. And he would, he was also in My Favorite Martian, which was a favorite show of mine. And he went on to become a director, and he directed, before he died, he was a director of episodes of Blossom. You remember that TV show, Blossom?
Oh my gosh, yes. I did not know that.
With Mayim Bialik, who is now on The Big Bang Theory, and has married Sheldon, apparently. I can't figure that one out either. So what?
I do love that show.
It's really, I find it funnier than Friends, I'll tell you that, but that's just me. But there's, this is 1963. You got a boat, and people are, the sonar section of the ship is hearing this rhythmic tapping.
How long have you been in contact?
About 3 minutes, sir.
It's a funny one. Sure sounds like tapping on metal, doesn't it?
That's what I think, sir.
Bridge, change course to 030 and reduce speed to 5 knots.
Bridge on.
Try making contact by underwater telephone.
I've already tried. No response, sir.
Sounds like somebody banging a hammer against a wall. It's coming from a sunken submarine ship. And meanwhile, you got this crazy member of the crew named Bell who doesn't seem to be feeling well, and he seems to be having crazy, I don't know, panic attacks or PTSD or something like that.
Yeah.
And they can't figure it out. And meanwhile, they're trying to figure out what's going on with the submarine. What was it?
Now, last night we had a bad swell. That boat should have been rigged in. Instead, it was left swung out. As a result, she's 80% damaged and filled up like a swimming pool. Question, Chief. Where were you?
Begging the captain's pardon,
Don't beg my pardon. Just tell me, in a brief explanatory way, why you couldn't handle the initiatives of a chief bosun's mate. And why the efficiency of this ship had to suffer as a result. We had 9 hours warning of that storm, Bell. This ship should have been 100% prepared. Instead, it wasn't, and I want to know why.
I did the best I could, sir. I haven't been feeling up to par.
Well, did you report to sick bay?
No, sir, I didn't report to sick bay, sir.
But they spend a lot of time coming around to this idea that, well, first someone says it's haunted, which is kind of funny to me, but...
Oh, yeah, that guy was hilarious. He had, like, one line, but it was brilliant.
Yeah.
He was like... What did he... Like, I don't even remember exactly what he said, but I was like, yeah. He's like, it's haunted, man, or something like that.
Yeah, it's going around. It might be haunted. So,
Yeah.
But you have this crazy guy, Bell, and he just... there was one point in the episode where he was screaming for some reason. He was just like I feel like something like ah! Or something like that. I don't know.
Yes,
like
yeah. He
weird.
was, yeah. He was intense. He was super
He was
intense.
intense, sweaty, and they have to keep trying to put him to sleep in the sick bay. They knock him down with all these drugs or something like that. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a naval vessel, so everything is it's all procedure. It's all by the book, you know? Mm-hmm. But I feel like I've seen this before. I feel like I've seen like an episode of television, or even maybe something I read. I feel, you know how, the tapping and all that? And you remember Poe's The Raven, so I'm thinking of the tapping on the chamber door, that kind of a thing.
Right, right. Well, and then there's the telltale heart with the heart beating, but it's a little different, I guess, in the sense that, but that's what...
Yeah, maybe it's kind of Poe in that it's kind of psychological horror.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
But it's kind of different. This is kind of different for Twilight. I don't know that Twilight Zone went completely into horror storytelling, you know?
Right.
I feel like it was always, it was Earth all along, and we didn't know, and it turned out they died 15 years ago, or something like that. Well, we get it turned out somebody died, but this is more horror than you usually see in a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, it was definitely like a psychological thriller, but also like ghost story.
Yeah, definitely a ghost story. Especially, as this Bell character really starts to lose his mind, he starts to see ghostly images of this crew, and they all have their hand. They're all waving at him and waving. Come over here. Come over here.
Yeah.
Come over. It's just, it's just a little bit. It's a little bit over the top because he's kind of nuts, and you don't know whether or not he's actually seeing these things. These things are actually happening.
Right.
But everyone is hearing the hammering. So,
yes. Right.
So what do? They do this. They check the numbers on the submarine. It's a submarine. It's sunken. They send a diver down. And the diver tries to get in. He's trying to open up this thing, trying to get in there. He can't get it open. So he comes back up. He's everybody's a little frazzled, except for the captain. The captain is like, I guess, really tough or something like that.
Right, yeah.
But they do the research on the boat. They find out that it was sunk during World War II. 20 years before, 1942, something like that. And
I think it was 41.
Yeah, 41, 42, something like that. So I guess this Bell was on that boat. He served during the war, and he was on that submarine. But I still don't understand the connection. Japanese destroyers attacked the submarine, and then this guy Bell, I guess he was man overboard or something, and he was rescued. But then the ship was destroyed. So Bell's the only survivor of this submarine. So he's got so it's what they call now survivor guilt, right?
Right. Yeah. And PTSD.
And PTSD. Now, how the hell?
Yeah.
What's the matter, Chief? What happened?
I was looking in the mirror and I saw faces that they were staring at me. They were pointing at me. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but they were there. It was as if they were ordering me into the mirror, pulling me in. Doc, you see me in the mirror? Huh?
Yeah, I see you. Now, I see you just fine, Chief. I see you fine. Now, you remember that, huh? I see you fine. Now, nobody is ordering you anywhere, and you're not going anyplace. We're gonna whip this. I promise you, we're gonna whip this.
You've done, yeah. No, I guess you've done a little research into this. How does one identify survivor guilt? How does one overcome it?
Right. Well, I think that's definitely not by being yelled at and told to stop it.
Oh, like the captain did? Yeah.
Like the captain
shut up!
and the
Just
doctor.
shut up! I don't want to hear about
like,
it.
That's right. They were just bury that shit way deep.
Yeah, I guess
it was like
maybe didn't they have ship's counselors back then, or
right,
or anybody.
So
Yeah. So you generally don't yell at people to shut up when.
Right, or ask them to repress it and get over it. And snap out of it. So yeah, he could have done with some good therapy and some EMDR, which is the rapid eye movement work that helps.
What is that? EMDR?
Yeah, EMDR.
What is that? Eye movement something.
Oh gosh,
eye movement doctor. Eye movement.
No, I know. I can't think of the acronym right now.
Let me check. Let me check on the old computer here. EMDR therapy. There it is. Eye movement desensitiz.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to say that?
It is.
Maybe I'm tired. Desensitization and reprocessing.
Yes.
Because doesn't it seem that Bell, I mean, even from the beginning of the episode, he seems to be suffering from fatigue. He looks like he's coming apart anyway.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Like, I think what ends up sort of like my take on it is sort of like the ship, he's been on ships. He's sort of maybe been repressing all of these memories that he has and that survivor's guilt and all of that. And I think what ends up happening is that they end up back in the area where it happened. And so I think that's like maybe what triggers it is that he maybe hasn't been in the waters by where he was rescued in all those years. Right. And then I think that's kind of was my, I guess, fantasy. I don't think anything was said, but that was sort of my take on it, that because suddenly the ship was back in the waters where his submarine had sunk and his crew had been killed, that he was, it almost like awoke that in him.
Plus, he does say later in the episode that he thinks he's responsible for the sub being sunk.
Right.
So I don't know that's survival. For me, survivor guilt. If I think about survivor guilt, I'm thinking about you were involved in some kind of a horrible calamity or tragedy where a bunch of people died, but you survived.
Right.
That's what I was thinking survivor guilt would be.
Right. Well, but I think, too, there can be, like, thinking errors that start occurring. Like, if you survive something, you start sort of telling yourself a story that you start thinking, like, it's something I did, it was something because of something I said, or maybe, he hadn't, done a particular procedure correctly, or maybe he was like freaking out. So sometimes, like with if somebody has, like let's say he thought like if I because I didn't do this, and this happened. So I'm wondering if he hadn't done something he was supposed to do, like, because the guy had mentioned the boat at the beginning being damaged,
Right.
that he didn't like tie it down correctly. So that made me think that maybe something like that had happened on the submarine, maybe where he hadn't done something correctly. And because of that, he felt like it was his fault that they got attacked, or that they were
Right.
found, or I don't know. But I think it might, to me, it seemed more like an error in his thinking process.
Yeah.
Because he felt such guilt for.
Yeah, and he lets that guilt
surviving.
consumes him. It consumes him because he runs out of there, and then he jumps overboard.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know in what way is this. This is where it gets weird for me, because it's like you're looking at like a kind of straight naval mystery going on. Yeah, you got a crazy crewman. He thinks he's responsible for this, but then he disappears. They can't find his body.
Right.
And then they finally they get into the submarine. They find out no one's alive, and that this clanging sound was just the periscope, the broken periscope, just kind of slamming up against the wall.
Right.
And then they found the remains of 8 dead sailors, one of whom was holding a hammer in his hand.
Right.
So that's just, and it gets a little ooh creepy.
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
stuff
that
there.
was creepy. Yeah.
So but then the captain's like, okay, don't nobody talk about this, and don't nobody write this down.
Right.
So it's a little weird. I wanted to bring something up. We were talking a little bit about post-traumatic stress. It only recently occurred to me that I've been suffering from a form of post-traumatic stress.
Okay.
From some,
Why?
It happened. I think I can trace it back to the time that we moved back to the city from upstate New York, because I was I was under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
I had to move the family. I was suffering horrible tooth pains. I had to see it. I remember I had this. Actually, the night before we moved, I had to go to the hospital because I was suffering.
Oh my gosh.
I was suffering some horrible. Number one, horrible tooth pain, and number two, I was under an extreme amount of pressure, so I was suffering some anxiety.
Right.
So over the last couple of years, I didn't really understand why I was feeling the way I was feeling until in conversations with both Bronwyn and my sister. Because my sister is also she lives down in Pennsylvania, and she is basically kind of like a nurse's aide or some kind of an attendant, but she did study. And she was telling me, some of the things you're saying sound as though you've been through some real trauma. And I remember we took Regan to the doc. We took Regan to her pediatrician for the first time in the neighborhood because she had to get examined before she went to school.
Right.
For her new school. Her doctor took a look at me and Bronwyn and said, you guys look like you've been through quite a bit. And I was like, I wasn't even thinking about it. So you don't, and I think a lot of times if you're suffering from post-traumatic stress, you're not even aware of it. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think so. I think that if you don't have awareness of it, but I mean, thinking back on that time for you, like I remember there was a lot happening for you. And you're absolutely right. It's sometimes, we think like trauma has to be like this sort of like catastrophic event that occurs, but trauma can occur, like more long term, where it's like event after event after event. It's repeated. And all of those things can really add up and really take their toll. So I absolutely think that there are people who are suffering from PTSD, but they don't necessarily realize that that's what's happening.
Like it could manifest itself with anger. It could manifest itself in depression. And
Substance abuse, for some people.
Yeah, I was just about to say, yeah.
Or self-medicating in some way. That can be, drugs and alcohol. That can be food. That can be all sorts of, overspending, like shopping, people buying things, consumerism, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, I figured that one out. Thank you.
Yep.
Got that little free advice there. Thank you. Well, your check
There
is
you
in the
go.
mail. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. What else did I want to say about this episode? Okay. The acting is very good. The guy who plays Bell, we joke, but he was really, really good.
Yeah.
It was
he
mad.
really was.
I should be dead. Bell. See? And all this noise, see? This pounding, this clanging, that's them guys down there. They're calling muster on me.
Bell, I want you to hear me out now. Bell, I want you to hear me out.
Captain,
Bell, I want you to quiet down and hear me out and listen to a little logic now and a little reason. Bell, listen to me. Now you listen to me.
they're calling muster on me.
Bell, listen to me. Just listen to a little logic, a little reason. One man does not sink a sub. And one lousy circumstance does not decide a battle. And one case of sudden fear does not add up to a coward.
The only problem was for me, the episode, it's a little bit padded. I feel like this would have made, like the previous episode we talked about, In His Image, me and Brahman, we were thinking that this would be much more effective as a half-hour show. I feel like it was kind of stretched a little bit.
Right. Yes. Like it was definitely like a lot of like long pauses, whether not even like literally, but like figuratively, there was just like a lot of space in between, parsing out the information of what was really going on.
And the
I
acting,
agree.
it's well, like maybe the blocking and it's a little stagey. It's a little kind of like stage play like. In that way.
Yeah, it was a little over the top for sure. Like, especially like when he would kind of get up from the bed, like he was being summoned, like that was like very big, like his movements were very theatrical. For sure. Versus like more subtle, where you see more subtleties, like on film or television. These were definitely like very big theatrical movements.
Okay. I think.
But it also, that's where it reminded me of Poe.
Right.
And like the Telltale Heart, where it's like, it's just like everything's seeming, and I think it can be appropriate too, because of his like breakdown in his, mental health, I almost feel like he probably almost like felt altered. So like everything seems really sort of big and deliberate, because I almost feel like that's what he must be feeling.
Yeah, it's a very moody Poe-like piece, character, a Poe character-like piece, where you're just haunted by the visual stimuli, and you're also being haunted by what you think you're hearing.
Yeah, and your own mind, essentially. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to wrap this one up then. So, let me see. All right. I want to thank Nicole Phelps for joining me for this episode, 30 Fathom Grave. The next episode we're going to do will be, what will it be? Oh, it'll be Valley of the Shadow with Bronwyn Knox. And until then, I'll see you. And thanks again, Nicole.
Thank you.
Oh, I had trouble sleeping. Well, so did I. But I just invented something that'll make everything all better. It's My Poo. For $49, you can have your own My Poo. You can hold it in your arms like I'm doing right now, or you can put your head on it and rest on it. It'll give you lots of sleep. So, sign for My Poo today.